Did you know that Scotland, a country with just a quarter of England's population, executed 5 times as many accused witches? This isn't just a story from a faraway land. It's a dark chapter of history that saw thousands of people, mostly women, accused, tortured, and killed for a crime that never existed. Today, we're diving deep into the chilling story of the Scottish witch trials. It all began in earnest with the North Berwick witch trials of 1590. King James VI of Scotland, later James I of England, was sailing home from Denmark with his new bride, Anne of Denmark. Their journey was plagued by terrible storms, which nearly sank their fleet. Back in Scotland, a bizarre story started to unfold. A woman named Gillis Duncan, a servant from Tranent, was accused by her employer of having unnatural healing abilities and sneaking out at night. Under severe torture, which included the use of thumbscrews, Gillis confessed to witchcraft. She then named several accomplices, including respectable members of society like Agnes Sampson, a well-known midwife and healer, and John Fian, a schoolmaster. The accusations quickly escalated. Agnes Sampson, a woman of some standing, initially denied everything. But after being subjected to brutal torture, including having her head twisted with a rope and being shaved completely, she confessed to a series of incredible acts. She claimed that she and around 200 other witches had gathered on Halloween night. They had sailed out to sea in sieves, christened a cat, tied parts of a dead body to its limbs, and thrown it into the water to raise the very storm that had threatened the king's ship. She even supposedly repeated private conversations the king had with his new wife on their wedding night, which convinced James of her guilt and the reality of a vast demonic conspiracy against him. King James, who was already deeply interested in the occult, became personally involved in the interrogations. He was convinced that this was a direct attack on his life by Satan himself. His obsession would lead him to write Daimonology, a book that served as a guide for witch hunters, legitimizing the persecution and outlining how to identify, prosecute, and punish witches. The North Berwick trials resulted in the execution of dozens of people. John Fian endured horrific torture but refused to confess. He was ultimately strangled and burned at the stake. Gillis Duncan, the first to be accused, met the same fate. This event set a terrifying precedent and ignited what is known as the Great Scottish Witch Hunt, a series of intense national panics that swept the country between 1590 and 1662. Unlike in England, where torture was technically illegal without royal warrant, in Scotland, local magistrates had significant power and often used torture to extract confessions. Sleep deprivation, known as waking, was a common and brutal method. The accused would be kept awake for days on end, constantly pricked with sharp objects to prevent them from falling asleep, until they were delirious and would confess to anything. The social and religious climate of the time was a tinderbox. The Protestant Reformation had taken a firm hold in Scotland, and the new kirk, or church, was zealous in its mission to create a godly society. Ministers and church elders held immense power in their local parishes, often leading the charge in rooting out what they saw as satanic influence. Superstition was rampant, and any misfortune, from a failed crop to a sick cow or a sudden death, could be blamed on a neighbor's curse. The typical accused witch was often an older woman, perhaps a widow, who lived on the fringes of society. She might have been a healer or midwife, someone with knowledge of herbs and traditional remedies. This knowledge, once respected, became a source of suspicion. If a patient recovered, it was God's will. If they died, it was the healer's witchcraft. Personal disputes, envy, and social tensions often fueled accusations. A simple argument could escalate into a formal accusation of witchcraft, with devastating consequences. One of the most intense periods was the Great Scottish Witch Hunt of 1661 to 1662. This panic saw at least 660 people accused in just over a year. It was a time of immense social and political instability, and witch hunting became a way to enforce social order. Traveling witch prickers emerged, who claimed they could identify a witch by finding the devil's mark on their body, a spot that wouldn't bleed or feel pain when pricked. These were often charlatans who used retractable needles or other tricks to prove someone's guilt, charging towns for their services and leaving a trail of death in their wake. Consider the case of Isabel Gowdy from Oldern in 1662. Her confession is one of the most remarkable and detailed in the entire history of witchcraft. Unlike most, she wasn't subjected to recorded torture. She walked into the local court and gave 4 separate voluntary confessions over a period of 6 weeks. She described her pact with the devil, whom she met in the local church. She spoke of shape-shifting into a cat or a crow, flying on enchanted straws, and attending lavish feasts in the fairy hills. Her testimony was vivid and poetic, painting a picture of a supernatural world that seemed to blend Christian demonology with older folk beliefs. Historians are still fascinated by her case. Was she mentally ill? A storyteller? Or someone trying to control her own narrative in a world that gave her no power? Whatever the reason, her fate was the same: execution. But gradually, the tide began to turn. The late 17th century saw a rise in skepticism among the educated elite. Lawyers and judges started to question the validity of spectral evidence and confessions obtained through torture. The use of professional witch prickers was discredited, and the central government began to exert more control over local trials, demanding more robust evidence. The last execution for witchcraft in Scotland was that of Janet Horne in 1727. The details of her case are tragic and absurd. She and her daughter were accused by their neighbors. Her daughter had a deformity on her hands and feet, which led to the accusation that Janet had turned her into a pony and had the devil shoe her. Janet herself was showing signs of senility. She was sentenced to be burned at the stake. On the day of her execution, the story goes that she warmed her hands by the very fire intended to kill her, commenting on what a bonny fire it was. Just a few years later, in 1736, the British Parliament passed the Witchcraft Act, which officially repealed the laws that made witchcraft a capital offense. It was no longer a crime to be a witch, but it did become a crime to pretend to have magical powers. The era of the witch hunts was finally over. In total, it's estimated that between 3,000 and 4,000 people were accused of witchcraft in Scotland, and perhaps as many as 2/3 of them were executed. It's a staggering number for such a small country. In recent years, there has been a growing movement in Scotland to acknowledge this historical injustice. In 2022, Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, issued a formal posthumous apology to all those accused, convicted, and executed under the Witchcraft Acts. Campaigns are ongoing to create a national monument to remember the victims. The story of the Scottish witch trials is a powerful reminder of how fear, superstition, and a desire for control can lead to devastating consequences. It's a story of mass hysteria, but it's also a collection of thousands of individual stories of real people whose lives were destroyed by an obsession with a crime that never was. Thanks for watching. If you found this history as fascinating and important as I do, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the darker corners of our past. See you next time.